We continued to invest when we should have stopped. And my gut told me we should stop, but we also want to be loyal to the relationships, and we want to stick, we want to have long-term relationships with people. You know in your gut what you need to do. It may not always be what you want to do. You have instincts that make sense, and you should trust it. And especially people like your first gens who come from such a diverse culture and a diverse background and have all these experiences that others do not have. You have something to share with people, and you should share it and voice those opinions when you have them, especially when they're coming from your gut.
We are back with another episode of How I Got My Job. We have an amazing guest today, and I'm excited to really dive in deep with her. I do have some housekeeping that I want to get to. First of all, thank you, Dean and Jenfrey, for moving forward and, taping an episode without me. I'm back from maternity leave. It was great, Jenfrey. Amazing job. So thank you for doing that with my guy. And then secondly, I do want to remind everyone that this podcast is really a resource for first generation students, right? We're here to learn about careers in commercial real estate. We are also looking to hear from key players in the industry. Most importantly, we really want to discuss those unspoken, those unwritten rules that really makes you a successful person within your career. We're really going to dive deep in that with all of our guests. So just as a reminder, first generation students, really listen. These are like key points that you're going to get, and we're going to build up your, I would like to call it a tool belt. So when you are coming out into the industry, you're ready. So with that being said, Dean, can you please introduce our amazing guest today?
We're so excited to have Christina Scarlato here today. She is awesome. I'll get to her story and her title, but essentially she looms large in the real estate industry. You look her up, you talk to anybody, everybody that I've spoken to knows Christina, respects Christina, and she's one of those people that if you say, hey, Christina's on our side on this one or something like that, carries more weight than anything. And she's built that reputation over time by doing the work day in and day out and sort of building where she is today. So your official title, Christina, is Principal of Portfolio Management for Real Estate Investments at the World Bank Pension Fund. But essentially, Christina runs real estate investments for the World Bank Pension Fund. She is the person there. And equally as important, she was past chairman and a member now of the PRIA board. And PRIA is really the sort of main area where the biggest real estate investors, pension funds come together. These are the folks that are moving the most capital in the real estate world. And on top of that, Christina is just an awesome person and totally a great person to talk to. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to bump it back to you, B, so we can start this interview.
So Christina, are you ready to dig in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's start from the beginning. Dean said you work at the World Bank. Can you tell us what the World Bank does?
Sure. So the World Bank was built to end world poverty. So when you walk into the World Bank, they're the main office, which unfortunately is not my office, but the main office of the World Bank in DC. It has every flag, almost every flag of the world, every member country of the world flag on the wall. And next to it is the mission that says their goal is to end world poverty, which is a pretty admirable goal. So I live in a little bit of an island of the bank. So we are in the pension fund of the bank. So we support the employees of the bank and we invest across the globe, but predominantly here in the US versus the rest of the bank focuses solely in emerging markets because that's where most of poverty is obviously concentrated, if you will.
Christina, we got a lot of folks that are listening in. And so there's all these new acronyms and I think people are trying to understand pension funds and everything else. And sure. we do a separate thing sometimes after these interviews where we go through, hey, here are some of the key terms so that you can understand. But I think folks would love to know kind of what do you do on a day-to-day basis, how does that intersect with real estate, and how should, folks that are in college and looking to start their careers think about the type of work that you do?
I do all sorts of different things every day. But at the crux of what I do is I go out and meet with private equity real estate managers. So managers who go out and invest in commercial real estate all over the world, and get to know them and understand what makes them unique and what makes them compelling to invest with. We are considered, as a pension fund, we are considered an LP, or a limited partner in funds. And so basically we put money into what's called a commingled fund, where funds like yourself raise capital. So let's say you raise 500 million, we would put in 100. So we would be 1/5 of every deal that Northbridge would go out and invest in. And we have groups like Northbridge, but we also have other groups all over the world that we invest in commercial real estate. And sometimes they focus on individual property types like industrial or multifamily. And sometimes they invest in what we call diversified. So they can do pretty much anything in a specific part of the world, or globally across the board. So I'm constantly meeting with potential new managers, existing managers that are in our portfolio, and visiting real estate assets all over the world. And just to clarify, I actually cover real assets. So I also do this on the infrastructure side as well. So basically my day-to-day is meeting new people and getting to know them and understanding how they can make us money. And if they're not making us money, what they can do to help save our money, or just getting to, visiting assets. And just one thing to add, I think I had a choice when I got into this world to join the real estate team. And I think for me, the reason I liked it so much and still love it so much is it's very tangible. So, you've lived in a house, you've lived in an apartment building, you've visited a mall, you visited a shopping center, you've worked in an office potentially, so you know what you like and what you don't like. So it's very easy for me. I found it very tangible for me to be able to go out and visit assets that we would either potentially be investing in, or that our managers have invested in the past, and understand what makes it work and what makes it not work. And the more I got to know more people and more sectors and more spaces, then the more obviously more informed I've become, if you will.
Great. And Christina, one follow-up to that, because I think a lot of folks, as they're in college, are trying to say, hey, what kind of skill sets would I need to be successful at that? And I know that you have to draw on everything from psychology to math to writing to any, international relations, to any number of things. But and I know you're a math major and we'll get into that, but if you were to sort of put that pie chart together for sort of skills you're drawing upon, how would that look for you?
Having the math skills is important. Being able to understand quantitative measurements are important. But I think at the end of the day, what makes me a good investor is that I have the ability to understand the more qualitative pieces of the puzzle, if you will. When we invest in GPs, the managers, typically we invest with them for at least 10 years. And oftentimes it's longer than that, because we want to continue to put more money with them in their future funds. So at the end of the day, I often compare it to a marriage. So we have to be able to want to be married to somebody for a really long time. And if you don't have that ability to understand the qualitative skills that these managers have, it makes it really challenging. Plenty of people have good track records. So track record is kind of what you've done in the past and how you've performed. Plenty of our managers have had really good track records, but they may have issues internally that aren't as obvious just based on paper. And so really digging in and getting to know people and understanding the dynamics of the team and how they work together is a really key part of the puzzle. And I think it's a key aspect to have. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but you guys started with unveiling. I don't think it really matters what you major in college. I think at the end of the day, the key to college is finding the ability to have that independence from your family, balance work and play and homework and school and sports if you played sports, and just being able to be a well-rounded person. And the reality is when you get out of school and you start your first job, people want they want to hire somebody that is willing to learn. So yes, you're going to take a lot of those skills that you were able to learn in college, but they're not necessarily based on what you majored. It's just you're based on kind of that base that you were able to create for yourself, that ability to learn, that ability to interact with people, that ability to be independent from your families. So I think that's the key piece of college, and it doesn't really matter what you major in.
I love that you said all of that, because it's such an important piece, and people take themselves too seriously when they're in college. So for you to say that and to be where you are today is a big deal. And I just want to go back. So you have like 2 immigrant parents, one from Cuba, one from Puerto Rico. Talk to me about how your childhood experiences really shaped who you are today.
Sure. I grew up in a bilingual family. When my parents actually left, they were both ended up in Puerto Rico, and they left Puerto Rico for DC for a whole host of reasons right before my sister was born. And what's funny is that they actually spelled my name with an H, right? So people, and that was the time. My parents were worried that I wouldn't be accepted in the mainland, if you will, if my name was spelled without an H. And how far we've come, thank goodness, but still how far we have to go. But it was an amazing experience growing up in a family that had culture that was beyond kind of my backyard, if you will. We spent every summer in Puerto Rico, with my grandparents. So I just felt like that gave me kind of a more well-rounded background, having parents that came from a different country and a different culture, and family was the be all end all. And I still carry that to this day and make sure that, I have a lot of family that are cousins, but I treat them like brothers and sisters, because to me, that's what they are. And that's true kudos to my parents who instilled that, that quality in all of us.
That's great, Christina. And I think that's an experience that I think a lot of the folks that come through our program have, and, are trying to identify with culture, a family culture, and then how to make it in the US, which is a little bit different, and they're trying to figure it all out. I feel, Christine, we've talked in the past because we both share a similar experience, although we had very different experiences growing up, but we both had dyslexia, which I refer to and explain to people as a learning difference, not a learning disability. It comes with some challenges in reading for most people. It presents that way early on, but it also comes with its own, I think, set of advantages, and would love to sort of understand how that played a role in your life. And then I've got a bunch of kids that are athletes with dyslexia, and I know you were a real athlete with dyslexia. So I would love to hear how athletics also played. So really those kind of 2 themes in your life to getting to you to where you are today.
Those are both very loaded. They definitely created who I was. Sadly, I didn't get diagnosed with dyslexia till I was in middle school, and being different in middle school is like a death sentence, or at least I thought it was at the time. So I never was really formally treated. That my parents started sending me to tutor. What was ironic was that, it was a tutor that was near school, not near home. So I wasn't taking the bus home with my friends. And if they'd found me a tutor near home, I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. But I wasn't able to explain that to them, and they ended up just giving up because I was so miserable going to the tutor. So I found my own ways to cope, and there were a lot of tears along the way, and a lot of times where I felt stupid or inadequate. But ironically, I married a man who didn't really have to study most of his life. School has just always, and the books have always come super naturally to him. And we have a 7-year-old, and when our 7-year-old was born, he always said, like, I hope that he's dyslexic like you. And it made my heart stop. I'm like, why would you ever wish that on anyone? Like, I was so miserable growing up because of the dyslexia, right? Like, I'm not so miserable, but there were times where I was so unhappy because I felt like I had to work 4 times as hard as my friends just to complete, the same paper that they'd wrote. And so that was really hard and it was really stressful. But it was funny because he said the reason was, he's like, you learned such an amazing work ethic and you learned how to evolve despite, in spite of your learning challenges, and you made it work and you work so hard. And I'm just like, I want our son to work that hard. And so it was certainly an interesting perspective. I certainly don't wish dyslexia on anyone, but I admire people who have it, because it does teach us how to kind of look at the world differently and in a different lens. And, I think there's so many resources today, so much better than when I was a kid, for sure. And so I think that's wonderful as well. But it was such an interesting conversation to have with my husband when our child was born. But look, I think today, like it's part of who I am. It's made me a better person. It's made me harder working. It's made me realize I know where my flaws are, and I know how to work around them. But I had to do that all on my own, which was really hard and really challenging and really sad sometimes. On the flip side, on sports, for me, I think, I love playing soccer. I played soccer all of my life. I think the biggest thing you learn from playing sports is just being able to work with people and teams. And I think that is a huge lesson, that you'll take with you forever. How to work with people, good, bad, the ugly. I think that's life, right? Working with people in work and marriage and parenthood. You always have to work with people. And I think that is a huge benefit for playing sports all my life and learning how to work together with people. I think it's made me who I am professionally. And I think it's a huge value add to my ability to work with people, and not just in my work, like at the World Bank, but also externally with managers and with other people across and also just to be a good judge of character, right? The more people you work with, you learn how to read people. And like I said before, this is a marriage. So you really don't want to get into a marriage with somebody that you don't trust or like, or realize that, they may not be of good character. I think being able to read people like that, I think is hugely important. So a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, no, I threw a lot at you there. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you sharing that story, and especially your husband's response. I've done a lot of reading, and I think it's relevant, especially to the first gen population, in that dyslexia may not be your challenge, but facing challenge and having to work harder than other people because of whatever it is in life. It could be poverty, it could be struggles with family, it could be you're a first gen, but those things can really be lessons that help you build your character, help you build grit, help you be able to work in different environments. And I think that's hugely important. And on the flip side, I think with athletics, it's always great to find some things that you can sort of build your confidence around. And like for my kids, I see that with them. They're building their confidence around some sports. They're learning how to be a leader amongst their teams and to work with people. And that gives them, some of the transferable skills to be like, oh, if I keep using my left hand in lacrosse, I get it. I need to do that in academics. So appreciate the comments, and I'll bump it to you for the next question.
Sure. You mentioned, Dean, that, you listed, dyslexia, and you had immigrant parents, and, having all these things that might be a deficit to your growth, right? And some people have all, right? They just have this pile against them. But Christina, you were able to overcome a lot of those things, right? Whether someone's seen it as overcoming or you saw it as just being a part of your life, right? But let's talk about like how you went to an amazing school. You went and got your MBA. Talk to us about that. Like, how did you pick the school that you went to? Was it hard? And having immigrant parents, were they able to help you? Give us that experience, because a lot of people are going through that right now.
Sure. So I picked my school because of soccer. Truth be told, I really, it was my dream to play college soccer, and I got to achieve it. And I'm ever so grateful for the opportunity and the ability to go to school for a lot less. So that was huge, to be a scholarship player, obviously. My parents were super supportive of everything I ever did. I think My parents are passed away. So I guess I can talk badly about them a little bit. But I think for my father, he was married before, had 4 kids, and then had us. And I think he made some mistakes that I think if he was alive today, he would recognize. And so he kind of made up for it with my sister and I, and for better or for worse. And they were just there. They were present. And like I just it was crazy when they were gone because they were no longer present. And the fact, I took for granted how present they were in my lives, and how supportive they were. And that's something that I try, as much as I travel a lot with our job. I travel the world, so I'm on the road quite a bit, but I am really, really careful that I'm always present when it really matters, for my 7-year-old, and I want to continue to be. I'm always here for his birthday. We play hooky. That's a tradition. So I just think for me, the reason I was able to overcome challenges was because my parents were super, super present and super helpful. And my dad would stay up with me till 2 a.m. working on that paper. And I'm not going to lie, he probably wrote a few of them because he just got sick of me crying hysterically. And, this was high school, obviously not college. By that college, I had to figure it out on my own. But, there were nights where he just ended up writing me a paper because he was like, I can't watch my daughter suffer anymore, on a silly English paper. So, I think for me, having that base was amazing and huge. And I appreciate them so much for that. I know not every child has that advantage, and I do think that was a huge advantage I had that helped me kind of overcome some of the challenges that were presented to me as I was growing up. But yeah, so I picked Seton Hall for soccer. My parents did pass away while I was in college, so I actually moved to Costa Rica for a year after that because I wasn't ready for the real world. I actually would have become an actuary, which is kind of weird, but I'm sure I would have been great. So, and then when I was in Costa Rica, I was doing volunteer work for a reforestation company and kind of realized it's probably time to come home and, put my education to work. And so I ended up coming back and deciding to get my MBA at GW since my sister was living in our house. And so we lived together for those 2 years while I was getting my MBA. And that got my foot in the door at the bank because they were down the street, and my mom had worked there. So full disclosure, I used that window, but I also, once I was in the door, I worked my butt off to stay. And I think that's the reason I got eventually hired and all the things. So
It's
rather than just an intern.
Yeah, it's like you knew my next question, because I was going to say your mom was at the World Bank, which is how you got in, right? And so did you always know that was the plan? Like, did you know that this is what you wanted to be, or did you just fall into it? Like, talk to us about that, because there was an in because it was easy, but what happened,
So for me, I literally would have become an actuary. I used my, my background to get into a group that places interns who are from multicultural or minority backgrounds. And it was hard because I played soccer. So a lot of my summers were spent playing soccer. So it was hard for me to find a job that was willing to take me. And I needed to leave early for preseason and then all the like. So that one I got on my own, obviously using my background to kind of use that as a stepping stone in as well. But it was funny because I worked near my mom, and so I used to meet her for lunch every once in a while. And I would walk into the bank, and obviously you see as I mentioned at the very beginning, the flags on the wall with the mission to end world poverty. And then you'd go to the cafeteria, and like there were easily 5 different languages being spoken at any given moment in the cafeteria, minimum. Right. And I just thought it was such a cool thing to be part of. And so that's why when I did decide to go to GW for my MBA, I'd actually majored in international business because I just thought it was so interesting. And then I used that, my mom's friend to help me get an internship and kind of wiggled my way from there. But I made sure I was known and that people knew who I was. And then I worked hard once I got my foot in the door to make sure that I didn't, go out the door the way I came in. I wanted to stay and I wanted to work there. And it was hard because when I finished my MBA, the bank was actually letting people go. So I actually started looking for another job outside of the bank because I thought for sure this wasn't going to work out. Obviously, if they're letting people go, they're not going to hire me, right? But thankfully, an old friend of my mom who had seen my work ethic, who was actually a retiree, but he worked there as a consultant, he kind of caught wind that I was looking for jobs and I was interviewing and the like. And he was like, this is ridiculous. And he stormed into my former first real jobs boss at the bank. And he's like, you have to give this girl a chance. She's so smart. She's bright. She's been here. You have to give her an opportunity. Like, you would be stupid to let her go, kind of thing. So I got a job as what, at the bank we call a consultant. So, it's not staffed at the bank, and then eventually I was able to get staffed and prove myself there as well. And, found my way into the world of pension. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And you've been there for so long. I heard you on one of your podcasts, you called yourself a lifer, right? I do want to dig into that, just because most times you're not going to find someone staying at the job that they started after, their first big job, and then staying there for as long as you did. You're still there. It's almost 19 years, right? So talk to us about the reasons that you stayed. Obviously, it's an amazing mission, but it has to do with more than just that, right?
Sure. Everywhere has its flaws. If the perfect opportunity came along, I would consider it. I have considered it in the past. For me, I've been able to grow at the bank. It's actually a really tough place to join as a young person. But I've proved myself, and, certain people left at the right time, and I slotted myself in and showed that I could step up. One of the saddest moments in my career also ended up being one of the best moments in my career, was when my original mentor actually left the bank and went to start a new shop with some of our former colleagues. I was devastated because he was my mentor. He taught me everything I know. He brought me into this real estate world. But him leaving actually gave me an opportunity to flourish, right? Because up until then, I was kind of always in his shadow, which was great. Like, I was learning constantly. But when you left, it was like, oh, wow, like, there's an opportunity here to really take a lead. And I did. And that's how I was able to prove myself. So I think, I've been able to take advantage of those opportunities. I've worked really hard to build a portfolio. I'm pretty proud of the portfolio that we've built. Like I said before, these are 10-year relationships, so they all take time to make, and then you live with them for a long time. So if you didn't make the right decision, you gotta live with it. You can't just get rid of it. It's not public equities where you can just, sell the stock tomorrow. You gotta live with it. So, we have some good, we have some bad, but overall, I'm really proud of the portfolio we've built, and there's a lot of pride in that. And so leaving it would be really hard to do, I think, as part of it. I talked about being there for my child, but the bank has really good work-life balance, and my parents being there, right? I think for me, that work-life balance, and, that includes every other Friday off. That includes a lot of vacation time. To me, that's essential. Like, I want to volunteer at the field trip when it's available. I want to be able to take a day off here and there when I need to play hooky with my son on his birthday, right? Like, I want to be able to do those things. And so the bank affords me that ability because it's such a strong work-life balance.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think definitely something that's more thought about now than when we started our careers. I think that there's, people and students are thinking about that balance and how it makes sense, and thinking about it in different stages of their life. And we're in a period where all that is kind of up in the air, because there's negotiations that are going on in real time, right, as post-COVID. So I think that that's an important thing to think about. I did want to go back, Christina, as you're looking at this career trajectory at the World Bank. I think it's important for people to understand that you can make mistakes, and would love to hear if you have ever done that, but something that you looked back on and maybe it was a mistake, maybe you wished you did it a little bit different, and how was that helpful at the end of the day? Was that hurtful? I think, we talk to a lot of people that they're so afraid to do an internship or something because they don't want to mess it up. And I think we try to give folks the confidence that, like, it's okay to mess things up, but would love to hear your perspective on that.
I tell my 7-year-old this every day. Mistakes are how you learn, right? That's all that matters. Mistakes are great. Mistakes are huge, right? Like, I mean, if you don't learn from them, then we have another issue, especially my 7-year-old. But mistakes are how we learn. And obviously some organizations are more forgiving than others, but like, I don't make bonus. So I could throw this whole thing in the toilet and I still make the same amount of money. So I have pride in what I do and I'm not going to, and I work really hard to make sure I don't. But guess what? I've made mistakes. There's no question, right? I think the biggest mistake that I can say that I've made in the past, 15 years, 16 years that I've been doing what I'm doing right now, is when I haven't trusted my gut. I've talked about before that qualitative piece, right? That piece of, at the end of the day, we're investing in people. And if those people don't get along or have there's some sort of issues, or they can't keep people that are important, or there's something it's my job to figure out what those are. And every organization has issues. Every organization isn't perfect. There's no question about that. But is there something more there that we need to be worried about? And I think the biggest the mistakes I've made in the past, and at the end of the day, we invest in managers and we invest in a series of funds with them typically. And there have definitely been times where I haven't. We've continued to invest when we should have stopped. And my gut told me we should stop, but we also want to be loyal to the relationships, and we want to have long-term relationships with people. But there were a whole host of reasons, if I look back, and my gut was telling me it's time to take a pause at a minimum, right? And we can always come back, future funds, and continue to support a manager typically. But we should have paused, and we didn't. And I look back and I'm like, I should have listened to my gut. And I think that's an important message, right? Because I think at the end of the day, and I think I was talking to B about this with motherhood. It's like, people constantly are telling you how and what to do. And the reality is in your gut what you need to do. It may not always be what you want to do, but you need to trust that gut, because inside you have instincts that make sense, and you should trust it. And especially people that are like your first gens who come from such a diverse culture and a diverse background and have all these experiences that others do not have. You bring a different perspective that is so awesome. And I think it's amazing. And you have something to share with people, and you should share it and voice those opinions when you have them, especially when they're coming from your gut.
I love that, because trusting your gut and having that background, that you're in a room with everyone that looks alike and you're coming in with that perspective, is so important. And that's really why you're in that room, because if you're just thinking like everyone else, then there's really no point of you being there. So with that being said, I want to dig into that a little bit more. You're just like giving me the easy transitions. Thank you, by the way. In some rooms, being different is a disadvantage. I've heard you say that in your case, being different was an advantage. And I 100% agree, kind of because of what we just kind of talked about. But can you dig into that a little bit more? Because all of the first gen students are coming in and they're different. And yes, there are certain things that you kind of want to make sure you understand. And those are those unwritten rules. And we'll dig into that a little bit more. But let's talk about those differences and how they do make you shine.
So super interesting story. So I was talking to a woman who was one of the pioneers in this industry for real estate private equity. And we're both on the board of a firm, or we were both on the board. She was actually rolled off, but we were both on the board of a firm. It's a bit of a startup. And the ladies had done a video kind of like introducing themselves. And she was really concerned that it was too provocative. And then she told a story about how her first meeting with external managers and her boss, how afterwards he yelled at her and told her that she needed to go home and buy all black and navy suits and look like the rest of the men in the room. Now, mind you, this was many, many moons ago, and thankfully we have come a long way. But my response to that was, I think the video is amazing. I'm really sorry that you went through that, but I think times have changed, thankfully. And quite frankly, I like standing out in a room. I love wearing an orange dress on stage, and I want people to remember me. And I want people to remember that I'm no BS, and I will challenge situations, and I will not just be a wallflower and say yes to everything. So I feel like it's an advantage. I will say, there are norms, right? Like you got to do it within a box. But I don't want to look like everybody else in the room. I don't want to look like a man in the room. I want to look like me. And I want people to remember me and appreciate me for the opinions that I have, that are different. I think it's important. I just truly think that using that difference is a valuable thing. Now, granted, let's put a little context to it. I'm an LP, so I bring the money to the managers, right? So I have the money. So people kind of have to be nice to me. So I can get a little away with a little bit more than most, maybe. But who cares? Like, so what? So that is what it is. That's fine. I'm willing to take advantage of that. We got to take our angles when we can and be heard. And once we're heard and people like what we have to say or appreciate what we have to say, then we'll be respected. And I think that's hugely important. Don't be a wallflower, like do it within a box, right? Know the audience, know the room, understand kind of where the unwritten rules are. But don't feel like you have to be a wallflower. Like you said, I think people are appreciating more and more diversity of thought, which I think is hugely important. And you're in there for a reason. So show that diversity of thought and give a different perspective and make them understand that they actually did the right thing by hiring you because you did bring that value that they've been looking for or they didn't even know they needed. So I think that's hugely important as well.
And one more thing to add to that. There's been companies that has gotten in trouble because they didn't have that diversity of thought in that room. So people remember, like, bring that perspective, trust your gut, speak up, because it saves some company. It could have saved some embarrassment for some companies out there.
Absolutely.
B and I talk about this a lot. We've heard you in the past sort of talk about how you built up that confidence and that, being young and playing with a lot of the boys in soccer, you built up a sense of confidence, could be out of your comfort zone and could really show who you were. I know, and we've seen it with a lot of our coffee connectees, you can come into a room, you've got a bunch of folks that are white guys that look like me that are all dressed the same, and they seem to have a confidence about what they are doing. We call them quote unquote finance bros in the industry, right? How do you, or what would you recommend for first gens that are coming into those rooms? Like how do they get to feel confident and not just feel like, wow, people are talking a language, in vernaculars I don't understand. When they're talking about the summer in personal connections, they're not personal connections that I have. I don't summer in the same places. I'm not playing the same sports. Like, how do you get the confidence not to be a wallflower?
So my answer would be fake it till you make it. Sometimes you just gotta pretend, or not pretend. Pretend's the wrong word because that's kind of going back to the way things were. But just listen, engage. Engage where you feel comfortable. I think just be an active listener and find a spot where you feel like you have an entry point that isn't about summering in the Hamptons. I don't know. I've never summered in the Hamptons. And sometimes you got to fake it a little bit, and that's okay too, because at some point, at first you got to get your foot in the door, right? So my foot in the door at the bank was my mom. Sometimes you got to get your foot in the door in a group of people who, not because it doesn't necessarily have to be a group of white people. It can be, white privileged people. It can be a group of anybody, right? You got to find connections with people when you interact with other people that you don't know. That's just human nature, right? So get in there, find a way in, actively listen, and then find your entry point as a way to connect with people. I mean, at the end of the day, humans connect with each other in all sorts of different ways, and you just got to listen and find a way to enter, would be my suggestion. It's not a great suggestion, but and then sometimes you just got to fake it. I mean, I've certainly faked it. There's no question. And in a business sense, I'm not talking about like the lacrosse and sports and things like that, but there are definitely times where I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. But if I ask, I'm going to look really stupid. So I write down notes and I'm like, I need to look this up because I have no idea what this term means. And I probably should. So maybe, I tell this to my young folks as well. I'm like, look, we're in an investment committee meeting and I talk fast. And, there sometimes might be something that you don't understand, whether it's on our team or a private equity or what have you, jot down notes, ask questions on a piece of paper, throw them an email, especially in the Zoom world that we've been in for the last couple of years. I'm like, throw them in an email, let them collect or don't, I don't care. And then shoot them my way. And if it's simple, I can give you a quick response. If it's more complicated, we can sit down on Zoom and I can explain it to you further. But look, I'm constantly learning, and so don't be shy to not know what something is. But if you feel truly genuinely like that, maybe you should know it, then you just jot it down and Google it when you get home. That's the beauty of AI and the internet. Like, every answer is out there.
Yeah.
So you don't have to feel foolish to not know something, or just ask questions. I mean, the reality is, understand the relationship. Like with my colleagues in my office that are newer, like, I encourage them to ask me any question they want, and there's no stupid questions. And find people like that too. Someone like Dean, obviously, who will sit down and answer any question you got. Like, and there is no stupid questions. Find people that are friendly faces that'll work with you, and we're happy to go through and teach you things that that may seem more complicated than they are. So I don't know if that really answers your question. But.
It does. And I think you kind of go into that space where I wanted to go into, which was the mentor and how mentorship is so important. You kind of talked about your mentor. So do you want to talk about how important having a mentor is, how to find a mentor, how you found your mentor? Because I think first generation students, I think that's going to really help them get to that next level. So let's dig in on that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, again, I think it's about human connections, right? You can't force a mentor, right? Unfortunately, like it either kind of happens or it doesn't. Like, mine just came out of nowhere and said to me, more about the pension fund than I do, and I can teach you about real estate. That's easy. And I was like, whoa. And he became a mentor because he taught me all I knew about real estate at the time. So that wasn't, I mean, look, I think if you get an internship, for example, and you find someone that you respect in the organization, and you think that would be helpful, you go to them and you ask them, like, can we get a coffee? Can we catch up? I would love to learn more from you. Words like that, and again, making personal connections with people, not necessarily drilling them immediately with questions, but try to make a personal connection with someone where they feel a bond to you, and then they want to help you. And whether that's telling your story and how you came to be in this position to begin with, making those personal connections with people, I think opens them up more to want to help you, right? Rather than feel like they have to help you, because mentorships aren't a have to, they're a want to. And like, I love being a mentor, but it also kind of happens naturally, right? And I'm always happy to help anyone. But obviously, if I have a personal connection with someone, or they've told me their story and I'm like, oh my gosh, what an incredible story you have and how far you've come. Oh my, how can I help you? I would love to be able to continue your story and forward. And how can I help you do that? So I think those personal connections come back again. And I think they're super important to try to make with people when you're interning, or whether you're in college, or whether you're doing these coffee connectors, trying to make those personal connections first before drilling someone with questions. I think the drilling with questions is important because it shows you care and you're interested in all the things. But I also think that people are more apt to help you when they understand where you came from.
Yeah, I think that was really well said, because I know that we found, like, we'll get interns all psyched up to have a conversation, right? But in their mind, they're like, okay, I don't know what the rules are this. I haven't watched game tape, so I've seen 15 of these conversations. Am I supposed to ask for an internship on like day one, right? Am I supposed to see if they can give me a job? And for folks that are more comfortable with it, there's a cadence, right? And there's language, as you said, that's like, hey, would love to understand a little bit more about these things. And I always think it's like, you want to hear their story and ask questions and let things grow. But I think that that's really important, and would love to just kind of understand, because a lot of what we are talking about is networking, right? If you're talking to first gens and you're saying, hey, look, they're trying to network with people like me, how would you suggest that they go about that? What are good questions that you'd want to hear about you? Are there any kind of don'ts that, people get a chance to connect with you at a PREA conference and you're like, wow, that was rough. And you're like, definitely don't be that guy or that girl.
Look, I mean, a pre-conference is people typically trying to raise money, and so they're pitching me their fund. Again, I mean, unless we like are sitting down to have a formal meeting for 20, 30 minutes at Priya because I want to hear about your fund, like, especially at the bar, later at the bar, like, again, personal connections, like growing up playing sports or growing up in whatever. And I can connect to you on that level and we have a nice conversation. Then I always tell people, I'm like, then the next week you shoot me a pitch book and you write like, hey, it was so nice to meet you and catch up with you about your love for soccer, or your immigrant parents or whatever. I'd love to continue the conversation. And if you don't mind, here's my pitch book. So, I mean, that's a context of work. So it's a little bit different, but it's the same idea where it's, I think you need to, when you're going to something like this, like a connection, a networking connection, right? I think it's important to be educated who you're talking to, right? So having some basis of understanding where they work, what does that company do? What's interesting to you about that, right? To show interest in what they do, right? And try to make some of those personal connections, but also show an eagerness for them and for what they do, right? It's a balance. You don't want to lay it on too thick. You don't want to come off as like a stalker. You don't want to, come and ask for a job immediately, but you do want to show that you're that interest and that engagement. And so by being educated, and educated means a quick Google search. I mean, everything's on the internet, literally everything. So like, what does a company do? Let's take a quick, what's the mission of the company and the purpose, and all that is available on the internet in 5 minutes. You can find all that, and you can find a bio of a person and you can see, hey, they went to the same school as me, or they grew up in the same town as me, or they live in New York City and I do too. I don't know. Like, you can find little commonalities that you can use to engage with that person as well. And to find that common ground and that personal connection, and just kind of create that relationship more organically than forced, if you will.
I think all of that makes a lot of sense. And I do want to circle back and really dig into real estate investing for a little bit, because if someone's listening to your story and they're like, this all sounds great, I love her title, I love what she does, what do you like about it? Like, what's the day-to-day? Like, why would someone, first generation, they're interested, they're in, tell us a little bit more about it, what you like about it, what you don't. We love a job, but there are some don'ts that we don't love about it. So talk to us a little bit about it.
So I love what I do. I'm bizarre. My husband's a lawyer. He's like, I hate what I do. No, that's not true. He sometimes likes what he does, but oftentimes he doesn't love what he does. I love what I do. And it starts with the tangibility of it all, right? Which I talked about at the beginning. I can walk into an office building and be like, this doesn't work. And I can tell you all the reasons why, because, and it's just it's my gut, really. But beyond that, also, it's a personal business, right? Like, I've talked a lot about the qualitative side. Yes, it's about going out and buying assets and being able to do something to them and make them better, and then turn around and sell them for more money. So that's the ideal, right? That's the be all end all. But it takes a team to do that. And getting to know those teams and understanding what makes them work and what makes them not work also is such an important piece of the puzzle, as I mentioned earlier. So that personal relationship in this world, I go to conferences in the real estate world, and it's like a reunion. Like, we're all high-fiving and like hugging, and like we are like so excited to see each other. Like, there's always a conference in January, which I inevitably have not seen people since like November, and we're all like, yay! I've missed you so much. Tell me about everything that's going on. So it's almost, what I like about it is almost like a family. So this real estate private equity world is a little bit smaller than like the private equity world. And everyone, pretty much, not everyone knows each other, but a lot of us know each other. And there's a lot of really just good human beings in this industry, and it makes it special. I love catching up with people on a personal level, and I love hearing what they're doing in the real estate world. And I just find it a super interesting world with lots of different dynamics that make it work, whether it's demographics and immigration and things, that relate to my life and my childhood, or, aging population, or, goods, Amazon delivering my package to my front door, and how does it get here, and what makes it, what makes it get here so quickly, and how does it get here in a day? Like, right. Like I used to teach a class at GW. I used to kind of like do like one class a semester, and it was how demographics have affected real estate, right? And then, I was talking about, Marriott creating Aloft to have like a more younger brand, if you will, that has lots of plugs and amazing internet, and you don't have to talk to anyone when you check in, right? Like, so kind of that piece of it to, Amazon and same day shipping and electronics, all the ways they've done to make their supply chain better and things like that. So it's all just super, I find it just to be super interesting. And then constantly I'm learning too. So recently we did a studio space fund. So studio space for like TV shows and movies. And it was fascinating. I got to spend time at different studios in New York and LA and understand what makes them work, and how leases are done, with how they used to be done and how they're being done now with the Netflixes of the world. So just the fact that I can constantly be learning, and then add to that the globe, right? So I get to go to Brazil and Asia and Europe and try to invest in real estate and real assets across the globe. And it's not everywhere you go, it's different, right? So, some places everyone rents, some places everyone buys their homes and things like that. So there's just so many cultural differences as well that layer on top of everything else that we do. And it's fascinating. So the fact that I get to learn almost every day, the fact that I get to spend time with some really interesting people, and the fact that it's super tangible and it's something that I feel like I understand really well, and it wasn't that hard to get my arms around. It's all the reasons why I love this industry.
Christina, I'm just going to come out and say it. You're crushing this interview. You have like the best answers and insights. B, you got to come off mute, because I think we can both agree this is really great. Like, I would go.
Just wish I wore something more appropriate.
I would ask you 30 more questions on top of this, because it's so exciting to hear your answers. And I think what I try to tell younger folks, like, just like being authentic, right? Like, take that risk of saying you don't know something. Take that risk. You were saying, look, there's times when I don't need to look. Like, that is so big. And when people kind of hear, and it takes a while to develop your voice, but when you have your voice, like, go with it, because it makes a real difference. So I definitely have like 50 more questions, but I want to be sensitive to your time. So we're gonna close this out with a question I always try to close out with. It started out as the hot tub time machine question, and then B said, that sounds kind of creepy that you're bringing in a hot tub into this situation, and not everybody has seen,
Most
the early
college students.
I've seen the early 1990s.
Like, Dean just gets creepy at the end of every episode.
Hot tub time machine. So we felt like the question worked on its own. If you just took out the hot tub, just said, hey, if you had to go into a time machine and you saw yourself just graduating from college, from Seton Hall, just graduating from GW, whatever that period of time is, and you were like, look, I'm going to give you just a few gems, or one gem that I think is going to help you, what would that be?
I mean, trust your gut, be yourself, be yourself, and don't be afraid. Worst case scenario, they say no, right? As long as you're not a jerk about it, and you're honest, and you're true to yourself, can't hurt to ask, right? And if they say no, that's okay, right? But if you did it with integrity and you asked in a way that was respectful, people will remember, and it may not be a no forever. So I think just be true to who you are. Don't be afraid. It's easy to be afraid. It's a scary time. There's no question. It's a scary time. But if you treat people with respect and with grace, they will give it back to you. And if they don't, well, then guess what? It'll come back to them too. So don't worry about that. But don't, as long as you do that and you ask, the worst case scenario, they say no, but they'll remember you, and your paths may cross again, and they may have an opportunity for you the second time. So just treat people with respect, treat people how you want to be treated. That's what we tell our 7-year-old all the time. and it may not work out that the first few tries, but it will eventually. And like I said, you may cross that person's path from the first 5 tries again, and they will remember you because the way you handled yourself. And I think that's super important.
Christina, you're amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you. Coffee Connectees, Christina is someone that you would be able to talk to if you want to. She is a connector and a part of our Coffee Connector program. So if you heard this and you're like, I want to get to know this woman and possibly make her a mentor, reach out to us. Christina is on the list and she really supports our program. So please reach out.
Thank you, Christina. You crushed it, as I said, and just really appreciate it. We're going to have you on again for a part 2, and I'm definitely going to be re-listening to this because I think a lot of what you said is universal, no matter where you are in your career, and we're all learning, as you said, and continuing to learn. So this was really awesome. For all those who are listening, thank you, and we look forward to talking to all of you again very soon.
Bye.